Hello, hello, and welcome to another episode of For the Love of Sports. My name is Michael Rasile, and this is a show where I get to talk about sports, I get to talk about business, and I get to talk about everything in between. Today, my incredible guest, Sarah Apgar, founder of FitFighter, mom of two toddlers. Sarah, how you doing today?
Awesome. Pumped to be here. Thanks. Sunny day in New York.
Yeah, right. It was really rainy earlier this week here. It kind of sucked with all the, I guess that was part of the hurricane. I don't know. But now the sun's back out. It's a good day. It's a beautiful day. It's a positive day. And we're going to roll with it. And I'm very excited again, Sarah, to have you on. Excited to talk about FitFighter. Excited to talk about your athletic career living here. And I mean, as I told you before, I'm in Bridgewater, which is a stone's throw away from Princeton. So excited to talk about your athletic career at Princeton as well as your time there on campus. But the first question I have for everybody on the For the Love of Sports podcast is, why do you love sports so much?
Oh man, the team, the competition, the thrill of the win and the loss, and what that does for us for, our lifetime.
Yeah, I think the loss aspect is something that if you don't play sports, especially now, I mean, I'm not going on a rant about the participation trophy crowd. I never understood it. I never gave myself a participation trophy, so I don't understand why everyone's angry at me for receiving one. I don't know. That's a whole nother thing. But where else in life do you find, I guess, consistent defeat, right? Like very rarely, unless you're bad at math, like very rarely do you find consistent defeat. And I think in sports, it's the discipline, the community aspect, as you said, with the team, but it's really that losing that you really don't find anywhere else, right?
Yeah, and also it's finite. There's a moment in time at which you absorb that feeling emotionally, mentally, physically, and then you address it, with your teammates. You consider it. You go through that grieving process. Then you pick yourself back up, and you step back forward, and you train, and you prepare, and you practice, and you do your mental imagery, and you work with your teammates and your coach, and then you do it again. And I think that process, like the finite nature of that process, I think is important actually in terms of being able to apply to more like esoteric experiences throughout our lives. And that's what I find to be really powerful about, like, specifically about the team sports experience.
Yeah, especially because it's also, as you said, it's that community, that team aspect that you all kind of share in that emotion, whether it's a big win, just a regular season loss, and even to go to the finite to take that a step further. Some of those losses, while all of them are finite, some of those emotions are significantly bigger, right? You lose that championship game, you've
Yeah.
probably never felt that loss before. So it's not just the finite aspect of it. It's some are a little bit longer, some are a little bit more emotional, and can kind of make it a little bit more difficult. But as you said, as long as you have that process in place to get over it, I think that part's pretty important as well.
Yeah, and I mean, like, man, yes, my freshman year, national championship game,
Mm,
double overtime against Stanford. I mean, I can take you back to moments in that game that I'll revisit, forever. The step out of bounds, right, which in rugby is like can be particularly, fateful, just because of like the way the game turns around, and like just moments where you made a decision, you made a movement, you missed a tackle, that stick with you forever. And like the vividness of that, I totally agree. Is I think it's cool that sticks with you forever. Because there's like something powerful about that. And then I was also thinking, as you're talking, like the way that the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual come together, in those moments, and the way that now I love the evolution in sports performance of, programs like at Princeton, for example, the Tiger Performance Program
mhm.
is now, what all student athletes are a part of. It's no longer, you're playing a sport, and then you have, a sports psychologist you can go to if you need it. Now, we've all realized that, much like life, sports also is this, like, this combination of all of those aspects, of our, like, human nature, our humanness. And so I think that's been a great evolution.
Yeah, I think that is, the combination of all of those is something that, overly, it feels like over the last, 10, 15 years where we kind of all knew it's all connected, right? If you're in a good headspace, you're going to have less distractions, less stress, so potentially you're going to perform better on the field or on the court, wherever that is. So I think that part is pretty important. And Let's dive into your rugby career a little bit. Two-time All-American at Princeton University. Shout out University of Princeton, right? I'm sorry, I don't mean to mix up these words a little bit, but it's such a cool place. We were talking about it before. It's kind of like Hogwarts. It's, if you've never been, highly suggested just to go walk around. But what considering it's such an academic school, it's lauded. Obviously one of the best in the country for academics and Ivy League. What are athletics like at Princeton, and how can you compare or contrast that, I guess, to what we kind of already know about Princeton, with it being, again, a very smart school, a lot of smart people going on to get all these Fortune 100 jobs. How do you compare the athletics and the academics at a school like that?
Princeton is a place that is filled with intensity all the
Mm,
time, and people who are intrinsically motivated, self-motivated. And that was my favorite part of what you see, on the athletic field. I mean, I think that's what you get with high level athletes, I'm
mhm,
sure, anywhere. What I love is just that, the heart with which, student athletes poured themselves into the game. Rugby was really interesting because, just to kind of call it out, I mean, it was a club sport at Princeton, but we were playing at the highest level nationally. I mean, it's been a club sport traditionally and historically in this country at most universities. So the kind of Division I rugby really was like a effectively club for a long
mhm,
time. Now there's evolution of programs going varsity, but so we'd play again. We'd play in the national championships. USA Rugby, and for me, three Final Fours. Every just about every year for a couple of decades. And Princeton was lucky in the '90s, had this incredible coach who came from England. He was actually a graduate student at Princeton, and just kind of
mhm.
met with some good fortune, started coaching the women's team, and really took it, all the way to the top. And so I loved just being like in that environment that's highly competitive academically, highly competitive athletically, but with some balance for sure. There's it's everything is sort of feels high stakes there, and there's a high expectation kind of across everything you do. A little less intense on the, obviously not a scholarship sport, for me. And so I'm sure that dynamic changes a little bit, things, but yeah, it was a cool place to be an athlete, and a cool vibe, and sort of competitive nature of just life in general.
Yeah, and so when we were speaking a little bit before, you kind of called it its own little Truman Show, and I think that's really interesting because a it's a great movie. I just think that movie is fantastic. Shout out Jim Carrey for that. But what I found is, with high school, you're kind of in that high school bubble, and then you leave high school, you go to college, you're like, wait, none of that stuff mattered. Like literally, none of it mattered. All the arguments, all the stupid stuff that happened, all the drama, literally 0% of it mattered. And then you move on to college, where it's kind of the same thing, right? Like you have everything that's happening in college, you're kind of in that little bubble, and then you leave there. I mean, did being a two-time All-American, going to four Final Fours, what was it like when you then leave Princeton again, kind of in that pressure cooker, in that chamber of, just as you said, unrivaled intensity within sports, within academics, and then you kind of leave to go on and start your life, quote unquote. How much did you get relieved of that stress? Like, what was that aspect of it like, again, from going in that such intense environments and then getting out into the world? How did that kinda change you, I guess?
That's a really interesting question, because I think that I agree that I think we all, right, like I had a professor once in graduate school who would always say, in every moment, whatever's happening to you in that moment always feels more important, more
Mhm.
consequential than in the grand scheme of things it really is, right? There's always an opportunity to impact that, over time, and to sort of have that become less like intense, dire, consequential than at that moment. And I think that that's definitely true. Reflecting back, what I love is to reflect back on those experiences and be able to feel and know, how important they were in terms of shaping, yourself as a person, as an individual, as an adult, as an athlete, as a team leader, and just love it for what it was, and love it for how that it shaped you, like at that era chapter
Mhm.
of your life. And also look back and know that probably all of those moments felt more intense, dire, consequential than they are in like our grand scheme of 80 years of life or 100 years or however long we live. And so I guess that's how I would sort of think about it. I love that it's sort of both. I mean, it absolutely, those college years, like those shape us forever. My being a team captain of a sport in college is something I lean back on now, like in business, with leading teams and understanding how to set expectations and meet expectations and what it means when you don't. And so that's how I looked at it. I think it's cool that it's kind of like both things, and serves like both purposes and fun to reflect back on.
Yeah, you can draw upon those experiences and the knowledge that you gained, but also understand, hey, like most of that stuff, while it was awesome in the moment and important in the moment, it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. Most of that stuff can kind of go by the wayside. And I also just want to touch upon one more thing before we move on. So you said you went to 3 Final Fours. I wrote down 2-time All-American. I didn't write down national champion though. Did I miss that or
Sadly,
no?
no.
Oh god. So going back to those losses and those kind of sticking with you forever.
Yeah.
I mean, what's it like? I mean, getting
Yeah.
close once, right? That's something.
Yeah.
Getting close 3 times. I mean, at what point do you just like
Yeah.
kind of like what point does that take over and just be like, are we ever gonna do it? Can I ever get there? Like how did the emotional going back to the emotional too, how do you kind of deal with 3 huge losses like that on the biggest potential stage?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's always something I'll think about that forever, and
Mhm.
especially that that one game I mentioned, because that's definitely was the kind of the closest, where you can sort of touch and feel like you can taste
Mhm.
that victory, and that the season had really been set up for that to be the ending. And again, it's like a beautiful thing about sports, right? Like it's not always the ending that you planned, and you imagined and visualized 100 times over. Um, and so that's something that'll stick with me forever, and you always think about it and have to make peace. You have to make
Mhm.
peace with that. And but that being said, because of what we just talked about, where now as you live and go through life, I think that particular thing of not of that, never achieving that final,
Mhm.
top of the podium becomes, I think, less and less and less something that, feels like that loss. Because now you just have so much more perspective. I got 2 little girls, a beautiful family, growing a cool company, impacting lots of people in lots of new ways. And so you sort of, I think, are able to transition and chalk that up to like, wow, the loss in and of itself is clearly like now what matters and what you learn from.
Mhm. And again, like grand scheme of things, it sucks, but it's cool. You learned something from it. You had those experiences. I'm sure in the moment there's nothing potentially worse than that. But now again, looking back, it's like, hey, that was cool. At least I did that. It sucks, but we kind of grow on. Obviously, those emotions get tapered down over time. It's not like you wake up. Hopefully, you're not like you wake up each and every night with a nightmare from some of those games back then. But
Yeah.
so I think it again, rugby is just such a cool sport. You going to Princeton, I definitely want to touch upon that. Obviously, you being an athlete is pretty fantastic. So take me on the journey a little bit. Which came first, the personal training journey or when you were an Iraq war vet? What give me the timeline.
Sure. So when I graduated college in 2002, I entered the military
Mhm.
immediately. I was a member of the ROTC program. So that's how my sort of path into the
Mhm.
Army. So I commissioned in the Army Engineer Corps that year, and then spent 4 years as a platoon leader, executive officer.
Wow.
I was a lieutenant and then a captain. Left the service as a captain. I had one deployment in 2003, 2004 to Iraq, to Mosul, supporting the 101st Airborne Division with the 52nd Engineer Battalion. And so then when I left the service, I decided to go to grad school. My husband and I traveled for a little while, really took some time to transition from
Mhm.
that lifestyle, which was hard. That transition's hard. I think that it's so, when your first professional experience and lifestyle is in the military, it's different to get out and you're sort of a little bit deer in the headlights. So I went to graduate school as a way to kind of again, make that transition professionally into a new chapter. And then during my first job out of graduate school, which was working for Warby Parker, an amazingly cool company I'm sure you've heard of,
Hmm.
started by four incredible colleagues, very mission driven. And during that time, those 5 years at Warby, I joined the volunteer fire service because I really missed the camaraderie and the community of the military. I loved that lifestyle and all the things I described about it, that, the physical challenge, the leadership, the team orientation. And so when I joined the volunteer fire service is actually sort of the very original roots of FitFighter. And during that time, I got my personal training certification. I'd always been as an athlete and a soldier, and
Hmm.
I'd always been interested in just fitness more broadly, and thought that would be great to just know more about the exercise science aspects and background of it, and take a little more of a scientific approach to my general interest and enthusiasm for fitness and sports. So I did a little bit of training on the side with some lacrosse players in Long Island, some athletes, and I started building programs for the fire department. And that, again, is really the birth of FitFighter. The very early stages was programs and training that would prepare firefighters better for what really happens out there, the
Hmm.
rigors of the weight load, the high stress environments, that mental, physical readiness that we just talked about, that's so synonymous with sports and with athletes. We're all a lot closer than we think. That's one of my core messages, is that, we're all humans, and no matter what our everyday endeavor is, we all share that need to feel ready for those demands, physically, mentally, emotionally. Whatever percentage is physical, mental, emotional, spiritual of that demand, that's kind of what changes, the nature of it. But in the end, like, we're all very, very close in terms of the fundamentals, to prepare us and make us ready. So that's, my interest in training and the science behind fitness, and sports and athletes really took off during that time. So that was around 2012. And so then, things over the past, 9-10 years since then have really blossomed from that time, continuing that public service career in the volunteer
Hmm.
fire service.
That is awesome. Well, thank you for all of that, and thank you for being a war veteran. Something I would not be able to do. So appreciate you going out there and doing that.
Don't sell yourself
For
short.
no,
Give
no,
yourself
no.
credit,
I
you never
promise you
know.
that's not for me. I promise you that's not for me. But no, sincerely, thank you for that. Thank you for what you do. And I think, with your athletic career, I guess, just to hop back to that for a second. I mean, graduating from Princeton, lauded athlete, potential. You probably had the world ahead of you. What was the reason for wanting to join the army and be a part of that immediately after graduating from school?
At a real baseline level, I was never one of those people who, going into college, like, through high school, going to college, was
Mhm,
like, I know what I want to do.
mhm,
Right. Like, I didn't have really those like long-term visions as a young person, as a teenager. I was very much, and I still am to an extent, I'm very much sort of like, living in the moment, loving what I'm doing, trying new things. I love change. I'm fine with that kind of, adaptation. And so I sort of bit of a chameleon. And so I didn't like enter college thinking like, this is what I want my major to be. This is what I dream of being as a professional. So actually, when I learned about the ROTC program and the scholarship to school, that program helps to pay for your college tuition. There's actually some ROTC scholarships that are full blown, full
mhm,
scholarships now to private schools. Incredible opportunity for teenagers and high school students. I'll just put a plug in for that. And a lot of people don't know that, or sort of the full spectrum of that opportunity. So I really, I tried it out. I tried out that RTC program, and what you do is you train. You are effectively training as to be a soldier, to be a platoon leader. You get your uniforms. You learn military science in the classroom. You learn about the 9 principles of leadership. You go out and do field exercises. You learn marksmanship, land navigation, and I loved it. I just loved all of that. I loved like the physical aspects, the team aspects, the challenge. It was a great compliment to my career as an athlete. And if by my sort of sophomore, junior, senior year, once I'd been doing that for a couple of years, I was like, well, I don't really have a, better idea of
Mhm.
what else I'm going to do. Like, truthfully, that was kind of where I stood. I was like, I love this. This seems like a great career. It seems like a great fit for me as a person and an athlete. And so, I think this would be a great 4 to 5 year commitment in the Army. And that was really the beginning of that career.
That is awesome, and yeah, I mean, you made a lot of the parallels from, the military to sports. I mean, we always kind of have a lot of those, whether it's, a very common one, with football, in the trenches, right? Like, that's a very obviously, it's a militaristic term. It's also a very, overused term in my opinion, but in football, it's one of the, going to war with your teammates and all that. It's really that commonality, that community aspect going and trying to defeat your opponent in one aspect. It's really trying to come together to work towards a common goal. There's so many of those parallels that I think it makes sense why you love the sports aspect so much of Princeton, but then also obviously the ROTC and everything that you did there. And I guess coming out of that, as you said, you got an incredible opportunity. Yes, Warby Parker. I'm wearing Zennies right now, so don't tell them. But great glasses company. They have a lot of cool stuff they're doing. They've
Keep it
always been
quiet.
doing. They've been doing a lot of stuff there. But
Yeah.
with as you said, then going and finding that volunteer firefighting aspect and getting back into that commonality, that leadership, all those things. Talk to me a little bit about FitFighter. So what exactly is it and how are you able to help? And especially in the beginning, and I'm sure it's evolved over time. When was the aha moment of saying, not only can I not only can I create programs for firefighters and help them with everything that you've learned in athletics and in the military, but I can take it a step further and actually turn this into a business where I can make a lot of money, help a lot of people, and have a lot of fun along the way.
Yeah, you got it. So this is a really fun founding story, like total kind of garage
Mhm.
hobby,
Awesome.
classic story where that really came to me instead of the other way around. And so once I had developed these training programs, one of the things I was doing was trying to figure out tools that we already had at our disposal in the firehouse, of which there are many.
Mhm.
I mean, firefighters love gear, and you need a lot of gear. And so I would use, tools like our off, tools coming off the trucks, with different shapes, sizes, weights. And we would, lift, drag, heave, pass. I would sort of figure out ways to mimic, to really connect for our team, the training, the fitness training, strength conditioning with the movements that were required of us on the fire ground. And what I land, through that process, what I realized is that, the lifeline, the bloodline of firefighting is fire hose. And we were, very seldom pulling fire hose off the trucks, filling it with, charging it with water from the hydrant, and having a chance to actually do those live fire drills, really understanding
Mhm.
the incredible strength and stamina that's required of managing and handling fire hose charged with water with resistance around us, hauling it upstairs, up ladders, requirements for search teams and other operations happening, on the way into that sort of high stress situation, in which most of your movements are on all fours. Smoke is high, bodies and lungs need to be low. So, really, really organically, I realized that, using that fire hose as our tool was a great place to start, with sort of that fundamental training that we needed, that grip training, the core strength. And so over time, I started to work on ways to mimic most closely those movements and those requirements. So I would take old pieces of fire hose we had off the trucks, used out of service, and I would cut them up into different lengths pieces and fill them with sand and rocks and poles and all
Mhm.
kinds of other things. I would attach eye hooks and like hose clamps around the ends and drag, weighted objects and sandbags along behind. And over time, again, as this prototype of this piece of equipment developed, we realized not only was this great for training hose handling itself and the movement of the fire hose, but this was great at general strength, power, conditioning, stability, mobility, because of the structure of these tools I was making. So I spent a lot of time refining this into something that would be simple and effective and safe and easy to transport, and would have this sort of semi-rigid structure that you could use to do the widest variety of applications in fitness training at large: lifting, dragging, heaving, swinging. And what that was these smaller lengths of hose that were filled with a very, very fine steel shot, which flows like water, but is 5 times as dense as water. So you create a weight and density in this tool that's even more than having, this fire hose charged with water. And in doing that, punched grommets in the end so we could still pull our equipment along behind. And we found this to be an incredibly effective tool, not just for firefighters, but for athletes and moms and dads and trainers and coaches that were looking for, great, effective strength training tools. So that's how FitFighter was originally born.
That is awesome. Yes, it's a very garage, as you said, kind of garage founding story where it's just you were doing something to help the people around you, right? Like this was something that you were interested in and you wanted to do it, and you're kind of like, hey, like we don't really use the hose too often. Like, why don't we actually try and use that? And so by actually just kind of, it's one of those like I don't want to say duh, but it's, when you hear it, it's just like, well, yeah, that kind of makes sense. Why aren't you, training with the hose? And by making it heavier, the one analogy I can go back to, I played a lot of baseball. It's right. You put that donut on a bat so that it
Yes.
swings. It's a lot heavier. And then when you take it off, it feels lighter. It's not. That's just it's not how it works. But as you
Yeah.
said, if you can do something that makes it heavier and harder, when you actually do it in the moment, it feels a lot easier, which I think is pretty impressive. So, did you create CrossFit? Is that kind of what I'm hearing here? Is it like a I know it's not quite like a games opportunity, but is it just use a lot of stuff around you and just try and get better as time goes on? Like explain exactly like what is FitFighter then? Is it just the application? Are you going to have events? Cause that sounds like a kind of a fun event, firefighter games. I don't know, but like talk to me exactly like what is the business model? How do you make money? There we go. How do you make money? There we go. That's easy.
Yeah, I'd love to tell you about sort of how a garage hobby and inventing a neat tool turns into a system, and a real mission and vision for the future, which is much, much bigger than having great tools and training. This is distinctively not CrossFit. And that's a really important distinction for me. That also, CrossFit is, I mean, gosh, my husband, I think, started doing those, the daily workouts with
Mhm.
CrossFit when he was in the military deployed, and so that definitely similar in spirit, where you start, which is being able to, in a short period of time, have just great, intensive sort of team oriented programming that builds a community. And those are all, things that CrossFit did incredibly well, and really set the standard, for this sort of community based, almost cultish training, fitness training. And that part I do love about it. What's very different here with FitFighter is that what we did in the last 2 years is transform this from a single tool to train firefighters for all of their comprehensive movements on the fire ground. Take the spirit of what that really meant, which is giving people the strength and conditioning and stability and the mental fortitude and readiness through that physical
Mhm.
and mental preparation and stamina building to be better at whatever their everyday was going to demand of them. And now we've taken the principles of that training. We've turned the modern steel hose, which is what we call our weighted fire hose tool, into a commercial tool that is now available to trainers, coaches, gyms, and the general public for their living room or their basement. And we've created an entire product line of the tools from 5 to 50 pounds that all use that same real fire hose, recycled steel shot, and the brass grommets, stitched at the ends to create this beautiful, simple free weight and resistance tool. And then we've developed a system around that, a platform, a training platform that has hundreds and thousands of movements and applications that, whether you are in your living room and you're looking to, have a safe, durable, easy to transport, great for your family tool to do strength training with and move and have fun, or whether you're, looking to have, complete product line sets for your basketball team that's safe for the court, and you can bring and do lateral stability drills with that entire spectrum of, people and athletes and trainers. We now have that system available. So, the steel hose system is a way to really add into your life a strength program and a conditioning program that carries with it that original spirit and strength of service members and what they're responsible to do in these life or death situations, and that brings it into the fabric of your own life. So ultimately, vision down the road for FitFighter is that we're transforming people's lives through that strength and spirit. We can, this is a tool forever. This is like tennis or like ice skating or like golf, or this is the everyday and the lifelong program that people can do with a simple tool that's inspired by our sort of most loyal and committed service members that provide for their community every day.
I love that. I love the mission. I love the spirit of it. And again, we're obviously where it came from. We already went over that, but I think it's just so cool how you were able to take it over the last couple of years and really turn it into something. I think that part is really important. And I mean, what has this? Well, first, I want to shout out Marcel. Feels like this is prime for Shark Tank. I don't know. Did you get on Shark Tank yet? I'll let you answer that one later, maybe. But I think that could be a lot of fun there. But no,
Yeah.
I guess like
That's funny. That's a great comment. Yeah, because of the firefighter.
I think there's a lot you could do that. I mean, I think there's a maybe I'll send this into Mark Cuban. I might know a guy. I'm not sure. Send this into Mark Cuban, see if we can get you on Shark Tank. I think that would be a lot of fun. But I think just the vision, the story behind it, I think is very important, right? And really the spirit, the emotions behind it as well. Over the last 2 years, how what are some of these successes that you've seen and like, kind of people utilizing the product and becoming better at what they want to become better at, which is obviously fitness. Like what have you seen over the last 2 years that makes you even more excited to wake up? And because I'm assuming you were in the army and sports, you probably wake up at what, like 3 o'clock in the morning. How do you jump out of bed that early in the morning and get excited to get going and get your day started, knowing that you're legitimately changing people's lives?
Yeah, people ask that question a lot about sort of, especially in this time we're in right now, where, this has been such a challenging time for people and companies and families. And, at the end of the day, the two things that in my life every single day that keep me going and jumping out of bed when you're exhausted is, number one, the fact that every day we're impacting more and more people with the spirit of our mission, and just literally the equipment and the training that we can provide. And the second thing is those moments with my little girls when I squeeze them tight and look at their smiling faces, and I think about the next generation and, the obligation that we have to make the next generation healthier than ours. And I think, like, man, we have no choice but to jump out of bed every day. I mean, there's nothing else that matters right now than for us to be healthier. And we've just seen in the last, 7-8 months, we've watched the life changing power of good health and strength. And that is something that we can no longer, can anyone stare in the mirror and say, this isn't something that I have to commit to. And I think, for leaders, like in our industry, trainers, coaches, people who are in our industry, running gyms and making great, home fitness tools and programs. Like, we have this obligation because we have this ability to help people to be healthy and be strong. And I don't see this as a choice anymore. I see this as the only thing that matters for us, because we've watched people who weren't healthy, for whom this has been a life or death situation. And I don't think we can, you just can't paint on that issue anymore. It's really dire. And I mean, not to, sort of take like a fun, super spirited conversation and be like a Debbie Downer, but like, I think it's really that's what we need to be talking about now, when we think about, sports and health and energy and just like this, kind of all the topics we're kind of swirling around here. that's what, that's what's keeping me going. And that's what's making me just like, put a big grin on my face and be like, let's do this.
Yeah, and it's kind of like a catch-22, right, in certain situations. Like, I'm here in New Jersey, you're there, in New York, and, obviously extremely densely packed, kind of worried about the spread of the virus, obviously, and we're seeing it affects people that are a little unhealthier, people that are a little bit older, obviously in much worse ways than people like myself, a little bit younger, like yourself, a little bit younger, obviously very fit, doing what you do, and seeing and understanding that, but then not being able to go to the gym. We've obviously seen a huge increase in those at-home workouts, in the virtual personal trainings over the last few months. I mean, obviously the mission is there for you, and the what you're trying to affect and how you're trying to affect it. What have you seen in terms of people adopting this product because they are stuck at home and they aren't able to leave, or they're not allowed to go to a gym and do what they need to do, and understanding that your product is now able to really help in many more ways than one. This seems like it's not quite, I mean, I don't want to say one size fits all, or you can do just about everything with it, but it seems like you can cover a huge basis with this, as you said, you have a line of products, but you can cover so many different things with one of these versus, a weight set that takes up half your basement or anything. So how have you seen over the last 6 to 8 months the adoption of your product and the utilization over it, especially with so many people now being stuck at home?
Yeah, we originally launched FitFighter to be, with the strategy that we were going to work with gyms and trainers and coaches at the top of our industry and really trickle down. Those are the people that influence their clients, their athletes. So the idea was to sort of trickle down, into people's homes and people's, garages and living rooms. And what happened was in March when, that professional market effectively shut down. And for all of us, it was about sort of, keeping the lights on and staying healthy at home. And that's when we realized, when we pivoted and we launched a home gym set, I picked my 3 favorite weights, and we started to, we launched an app and, to help people with kind of what movements and short workouts they would do with steel hoses. And we realized at that moment how special and how versatile this could be for people, and that people were loving, just bringing steel hoses into their garage and their living room, and they were really adopting this as a way of staying fit and a way of having fun. And for moms, this is awesome because you can throw steel hoses in a trunk or in a beach tote bag or a park tote. It's safe for toddlers. You don't have hard steel, which so many, weighted implements are in home gyms. And so this became this awesome, versatile tool for people in ways that I had never imagined, with applications that, as I now look on Instagram and I look at, what people are doing with steel hoses and throwing them in backpacks and doing like ruck marches up mountains and all kind, like rolling downhill. I mean, like all kinds of stuff, and it's fun for me to watch things, transform and take on this sort of magical evolution that, even I never imagined, having been sort of in the trenches for 5 years.
I was about to ask that. I mean, once you put enough products in enough people's hands, they're gonna do things with it that you never thought of, right? And so it's kind of
Yeah.
cool to allow, hey, if you can utilize this in a good way and you can get healthier with it, we don't care how you do it. But what are some of the crazier things that you've seen people do? Again, if you put enough of these in people's hands, there's gonna be stuff that you never thought about, as in, walking up mountains and rolling down hills. Can you just explain that one? Because I think that's probably one of the crazier things that you have seen so far on the internet.
Yeah, I mean, we've had people have sort of like, they'll put sort of like a steel hose here and then like do, like a barrel roll with it, or like put it above your head and like barrel roll down the mountain, which obviously is like, great for your core strength. I mean, we'll do rolls anyway in the gym, like in a more controlled setting. But I thought that was just really funny watching that happen. Heaves and tosses. I mean, super fun to like throw a steel hose as far as you can. So that's been really fun. Like I said, people tossing them into their, backpack, going on a hike, with steel
Mhm.
hoses and hanging them like at the top of the mountain on one of those little signs that says like, you're at 4,000
Mhm.
feet or whatever
Ooh.
in the White Mountains. And they'll like hang the steel hose on the little peg and snap a photo, stuff like that, where I'm just like, cool, that I'm like, that's awesome
Mhm.
that is a part of, what you're doing with your day. And that this, again, this idea of I mean, we have to weight train. I'm very, one of the things that I love to talk about with people is the value of weight training. People, there's a lot of people that still think of weight training and as like powerlifting.
Mhm.
Like as, oh, that's for like power lifters, and I don't, I sort of, they do yoga, or they do spinning, and they do like a lot of other, maybe they love Zumba, group classes, and they like other types of training. And I'm like, that's awesome. Like, you 100%, like, do what you love. But you also, like, every single one of us should be weight training. That's how we sustain our muscle mass. That's how we sustain our bone density. That's how we maintain our posture. That's how we get core strength. We sleep better. Our immunity improves. I mean, we have to train with weight. Loaded movements is critical for a long-term health. And so, like, that, my message. So, like, we have like a steel hose is like, that's your answer. Like, if you
Mhm.
don't love lifting and bars and barbells and dumbbells and kettlebells, like, grab a steel hose, 8 pounds is fine. And like, come with us, just move,
Just move.
move with some weight. And so that's like, that's my big sort of overarching message. And it's, yeah, it's fun to see people sort of like, lift, drag, pack it on their back, put it on their
Mhm.
shoulders, in a million different ways I've been watching.
I love it. I love it. And to get into the sciences of it a little bit, I don't really, it's not my forte, but with something as you said, because the steel moves kind of like water, so it's not that kind of static bar. That's always one thing, that people I've heard. I don't, but I've heard people that they like things that utilizing water because it kind of the stability and little tiny muscles everywhere that you really didn't realize. Like, how much does that help in this where it's not just you're not just making a single curl because there's kind of that extra movement. How much does that really help, especially those smaller muscles that we might not hit in other situations?
Yeah, I mean, look, I wish that one of my training, because I've got training partners, of course, that are like, far more have spent, their entire
Perfect. Yeah.
careers
Hmm. Hmm.
with this, and like that's fundamental to our, they're the ones that would design all of our training. But in essence, the way that we're distributing weight across a steel hose and in that horizontal manner, and the instability and imbalance of that weight, that's what's going to ultimately make those, those little tweaks that we have to make in our motion, like as we're moving. If you have a steel hose way above your head, if you have a steel hose that you're, stabilizing, like in your, it's called a Zercher hold, like in your elbows, ultimately the fact that that's always moving around a little bit on you and is distributed in a really different way than that sort of fixed hard
Hmm.
steel, that is what's going to give us this unique strength training opportunity. And the core is always working with a steel hose. So you could be like, doing a simple like lunge with a press. And ultimately, like, it's your core, it's working. You could be doing a swing, with your upper body, and you think it's sort of you're working your shoulders and your arms, but your work, like, that core is what's keeping you stable. And as that weight is always moving around on you, that's ultimately where we're really making our money. And I mean, people laugh, like, they people don't believe me sometimes when they say I really do. Like, I train 4 times a week. I do steel hose training, and I run probably twice a week. I love to run outside. Just used to go for a jog, and that is it. Like, that is what I do, and I love it. And I train on our live training platform with this group that during the day, and that's what I do. And that's where my strength like, it's what makes me feel strong. And I am 100% product of my own, my own message. Like, I walk
Hmm.
the walk, that, like, I walk the talk, or whatever you say.
I gotcha.
And that I think that's like one of the most fun parts about it.
That is awesome. I didn't realize you had a live. I mean, I know you said you have the app, so I'm excited to get one. Once we're over, just send me all those links that I
Yep.
can then share with people so that everyone can go and download everything because it sounds like this is absolutely fantastic. And the last question I have, um, so you said before your two favorite things about waking up every day. I thought one was going to be your daughter, and your second was going to be your other daughter. To be totally honest with you, but then they were both in there, so it's okay. So we checked that box, I guess. But what is
Yeah.
it? What is it like being a is the term mompreneur or something like that? I don't think I said it correct, but, like,
Yeah,
what is
like
that like?
mompreneur. I know I hear that a lot. Yeah.
Entrepreneur, something like that. How what has it been like trying to not trying, building a business as a mom? You have 2 young kids this is a young business, so it's kinda like a 3rd kid, I'm assuming, I don't know, but I'm assuming, and on top of that, now we're in the midst of a pandemic where, it's difficult for people to leave their homes, and I'm sure you're surrounded by your family, and I'm sure you love your family so much. But I'm sure at sometimes it's kinda like, "Hey, I wish nobody was here right now so I could do some of my work." I mean, what has it been like over the last 2 years, again, with the kids, but then especially this last 6 to 8 months building this business with all these other distractions and all these other things that are going on in the world?
Yeah. This every family right now is just going through chaos. Like that is just a fact, and ours is no different. My husband's a surgeon in Northwell Health System. He's in and out of the city every day. I've got the two girls, they're in preschool, pre-K, and we have Nancy comes in the afternoons and is with me since I'm over at the factory, comes for the girls. I take them, in the mornings. And, it really, it's a lot right now for sure for every family, just the juggling. I will say that I think it's my firm belief that being a mom and an entrepreneur is in the long run making my business stronger. It's going to make the company stronger. I think I would be one of those entrepreneurs who's like manic and working 21 hours a day if I wasn't a mom and if I didn't have other things going on that demanded hours of my attention per day. And I kind of get the sense, my self analysis is that I would just, drive myself into a brick wall and just like, um, sort of and kind of just be manic about things. I think the fact that I can take that break, the girls need me. And so I spend 4 or 5 hours a day with my girls. And I know that the company's gonna be stronger for it. And so that's one way to look at this notion of like, wow, how do you do it all? I actually think I sort of turned that on its head a little bit to say, like, I think it's important to be doing it all because I think it's important to have that balance. I think the business is better. I think the girls are better, that I'm so passionate about, something outside of them that I take the time during the day to do both. So it's a very special, living the dream. It's hard, it's challenging, but we've got a lot of people to help and lives to impact. And there's too much to do to sort of not say like, let's do this.
Athlete, war vet, volunteer firefighter. Yeah, I don't think, easy was a word that you would describe any of those things as, so why make it easy now, right? But I think it's awesome. Sarah, I think you're doing some really cool stuff. I really love the idea of Pit Fighter, kind of again, the story where it comes from, I think is very important too. That's why I always love having these longer conversations to understand who you are and really see where some of this stuff comes from. But this has been absolutely fantastic. Sarah Apgar, founder of FitFighter, Iraq War vet, as I said, mom of 2 toddlers. Sarah, where can everybody find you and FitFighter online?
Yeah, it's easy. Just go to fitfighter.com. And that's the best way. If people are for the social media fans out there, you can find us on Instagram. That's a great way too. FitFighter Pro and FitFighter Fitness are two Instagram accounts. You can find me, of course, as well. And yeah, we'd love to meet you.
Perfect. And I'll get all those links from Sarah in case anybody is listening and they just want to click on something, as well as anything to download an app. I want that link as well. So we'll get that for everybody. But Sarah, it was
Absolutely.
absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for your time today.
Absolutely. Thanks, Michael. This is a blast.